red leather, blue leather, blue leather, red. This is a video I didn't really want to make. You know, it almost feels sacrilegious as a Spider-Man fan to feel this way, but somebody's got to say it. The time has come for me to not only be honest with myself, but be honest with you guys. So I'm gonna say something out loud for the first time in the history of YouTube. Spider-Man 2 is the worst Spider-Man film ever made.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Okay, maybe not the worst Spider-Man, because this still did happen.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man! Oh, hell no!
Spider-Man 2, released in 2004, was the much-anticipated sequel to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Released in 2002, the critical acclaim and box office success were almost instant. And I mean, who could really blame us with all that beautiful Willem Dafoe going on?
Downplaying innocently made gorgeous.
Now, I personally love the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. It holds a special place in my childhood's heart. It made the action fun, even if it definitely murdered people, because it definitely murdered people.
Out, am I?
Hey, yo, what the fuck? But even with that death toll being just a little bit too high, maybe, it definitely kept you engaged. And that's what movies are supposed to do. And that's what Spider-Man 2 ultimately didn't do. Spider-Man 2 is boring. It's boring and long and predictable. A genre where predictable is almost sort of an Achilles heel, right? Now we pick up 2 years after the events of the first Spider-Man, and Peter Parker is struggling. His Spider-Man responsibilities are getting in the way of his Peter responsibilities. Hijinks ensue.
Pizza time. That's
classic Spidey stuff. Gots to love it, gots to have it. Now, here's where the story starts to lose me a bit. Why the fuck is Harry Osborn the head of anything at Oscorp? Since our first few encounters with this version of Harry, he's been built up as nothing, but very not smart. I mean, he just barely graduated high school 2 years ago. He's not the head of anything at this billion-dollar corporation. He's a very high-paid intern at best.
I'm ruined. I have nothing left except Spider-Man.
Shut the hell up! Damn!
Now, is that a petty and small point? Yes, I fucking admit it. But if there's enough of these little small details that mess up the story, trust me there are, it can really start to pull you out as a viewer. Boy, where do I even start? I mean, this movie, like any good one, has main characters, many of which that are returning from the first movie, and I just gotta say, for the sake of argument, they're just terrible this time around. James Franco is doing some of the worst acting I've ever seen. I mean, just objectively, take a look at this.
No fucking way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy. Boy, ain't no way, boy.
Can't be.
It's just too wacky looking to be taken seriously, I think. And this movie just has a bad habit of taking itself way too seriously. And I think that's why I honestly believe Spider-Man 3 is a better movie. Let's be honest, all comic book movie premises are typically batshit insane. At least Spider-Man 3 leaned into it and gave us those surreal moments that could only happen in a world like this. Now, shitty acting aside, Harry Osborn really isn't that bad. He even has some, dare I say it, good moments. His drunk interaction with Peter at the planetarium party was chef's kiss and added some emotional weight to the story that was just needed at the time. So he's definitely not the worst character here, not by a long shot. You see, that honor belongs to none other than Mary Jane Watson, the worst love interest in the history of love interests. Mary Jane is just hoeing it up in this movie. She's not only dating this astronaut, but she also gets engaged to this astronaut, and all the while, she's trying to gaslight Peter into another relationship. That's right, she's trying to have a web-slinging side piece.
Oh boy, yeah.
Gorgeous.
No, but seriously, it's really hard to like her in this movie. I mean, nothing she does or says is good in nature. And I know as an audience member, we're not really supposed to like Jameson, but what did his son ever do to us to make him the prime candidate for getting Ted Mosby'd?
I got left at the altar.
Now, moving on to the villain of this movie, Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus, who's actually going to be making a comeback in this year's No Way Home, is all right.
No, all right. I know that sounds bad.
Okay, all right. Calm down. He's not that bad. I actually enjoy him and his very bad jokes.
Because we found the rubber band.
What?
It's a terrible joke.
But he, much like this film, is boring. He's just super cookie cutter and just super bad at being a scientist for some reason.
Why the fuck are you doing this in a crowded apartment in the middle of Queens? And why are you half naked? Every time I try to sit down and watch this movie, I just always feel like the representation in, say, Spider-Man PlayStation 4 gave the character more to go on other than evil robot legs turned frumpy scientist evil. I mean, there's gotta be room for us to believe this guy could go dark. And this poetry quoting, horrible joke having, all around nice guy just didn't get that room.
Butterfingers.
Alright, now, I could sit back and make a whole portion about what I personally don't like about Peter in this movie, but to be honest, there's not a whole lot that I don't love.
Oh boy, yeah.
Believe it or not, I'm Team Toby in the great live-action Spider-Man debate. I mean, this guy is clearly a god masquerading as an actor.
That boy is good.
But the one issue I do happen to have with him just so happens to be my biggest gripe with this film. The biggest reason I don't like this Spider-Man story. Okay, so a big part of this movie's plot revolves around Peter having performance issues.
Yeah, he can't do amazing shit anymore for some reason, and it gets heavily implied that it's like a mental thing or something.
But I kind of have a problem with that.
See, in the last movie, we actually saw his DNA change. He's half spider, not in mind, but literally in his DNA. I just feel like it's kind of hard for us to accept that his powers can just stop working because he's having a rough few months. I mean, his powers were perfectly fine. Hell, some would even say at their best after he literally watched his uncle die in his arms. Not being able to fuck Mary Jane isn't gonna change you on a genetic level.
I need it!
Oh boy, yeah.
And look, I can already hear some of you guys typing in the comments that has been done in the cartoons and comics and even in Far From Home with the whole Peter Tingle plot.
Come on, Peter Tingle.
Let's go, bitch.
But it's not the same. Those guys definitely didn't have webs flowing through their veins.
All in all, this movie really isn't terrible. I'd be lying if I said there weren't parts that I actually liked. I mean, the train sequence is probably the best fight in comic book movie history. I just never really liked the movie altogether. I mean, it actually took me 3 times to watch this movie without falling asleep just for this video. And it just drags with bad plot point after weird plot point to another bad plot point. I mean, even the action gets a little weird, right? Like, why the hell does this bank have these cartoony bags of gold on hand for this fight?
Is your change?
Why does Dr. Octopus throw a card at someone he thinks is a human? Why do people think this obviously 43-year-old man looks young?
He's just a kid, no older than my son.
You lie! You lie!
It just doesn't make sense.
Or maybe I'm just overthinking it. Maybe this movie is the masterpiece the internet keeps telling me it is. Or maybe, who knows, maybe you're all just wrong.